Hello there everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I am continuing on with my Patreon requested videos, this time with an anti-anxiety practice. Right now, with everything going on in the world with COVID and back to school and trying to just manage all of those things, there's a lot of tension for everybody. So creating something to help ease these stressors in our daily lives would be a really big benefit. So I got to thinking about how I wanted to craft this. Immediately I knew I wanted something that's tangible and easy to carry and use multiple times. I also wanted to make sure that it was a practice that is accessible to those of you in the broom closet and make sure it wasn't too overtly witchy, and as well as something that is easy to accomplish for those of you with physical disabilities. So naturally, surprise, surprise, I decided to make a salve. Now, before I delve too deeply into this, I did ask those of you over on Patreon if you would mind me making another salve, because I know I have been making way too many salves lately, but I do think this is a perfect area to incorporate that type of herbal practice. And thankfully, for those of you on Patreon, you guys agreed that it's okay for me to make these salves. Most of you said you could never get sick of salves, which I am so thankful for, but a few of you did say, all right, this is the last one, and I'm gonna respect that, at least for the time being. Maybe next year we'll get back into salves, but for now, this is the last one for a while. So without further ado, let's get into this. Now, I have developed my salve recipe and just the way I do it a little bit more since my last one, so the way you go about the recipe has changed just a bit, but it is still very much along the same lines. And I also would like to add that last time I had quite a few comments about the cooking and if there were exceptions that could be made or other ways to do it, and I will touch on that later when we get into it. And of course, before I get into the ingredients, like I always say, this is what works for me. So feel free to tweak this practice and make it a little different if you need to, whether you don't have the same ingredients or you just feel you would align better with something else. Magical associations are not set in stone, especially when it comes to herbalism. The associations can change across cultures and just different areas of the world, and even to each individual, it could be different. So as always, what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. So just listen to your inner self while trying to figure out how to concoct a recipe or a spell, and maybe even tweak one that I share with you. Alrighty, now with that out of the way, let's get into what you'll need to make this recipe. For this salve, you'll need 1 cup of olive oil, 1 ounce of beeswax, and I also add in a small scoop of coconut oil. This is not necessary, but I have recently started adding it in, and it just kind of makes the salve feel all the much better. All that more better, huh? All the more better. There we go. Now for the herbs that I added, I used lavender for its peacefulness, chamomile for its calming property, and lemon for purification and happiness. Personally, a lot of times when I am concocting a spell or practice for something that is to take away something like anxiety, I try to add in a purifying component. This way it can strip that and take that literal problem away to then be filled by the lavender and chamomile's properties of peace and calm. So if you're going to tweak this spell, just maybe keep that in the back of your mind, or not, up to you. And you could also experiment a little. Maybe you don't feel the need for the purifying process along with just the peace and calm. Personally though, I find it helps to really heal the problem as opposed to just sticking a band-aid over it. Alrighty, now lastly, before I get into the literal recipe of it all, I would recommend doing the spell during a waning moon. Now the timing is something I always forget to put in these videos when I'm explaining just spell work or practices. I do have a moon phases video if you want to check it out, which does explain more on when to do things. It's a very awkward video and I'm not very fond of it, but it does get the gist out there. But in general, as always, even if it isn't a waning moon, you can still perform the spell and make the salve. I personally just prefer to do spell working involving around anti-anxiety or just something to decrease something on a waning moon, as it does have that decreasing energy. I'm talking a lot with my hands today, and I need to slow down. Every time I have days where I talk a lot with my hands, somebody calls me out in the comments, and I know it's gonna happen today. I'm very aware. See, self-awareness growing, talking with my hands even more. I'll sit like this the whole video. That's totally not true. Apologies if my hands have been distracting. It helps me think. Alrighty, now that all of that background stuff is out of the way, let's jump into the actual recipe. Now, like I said earlier, I have tweaked my salve recipe a little bit since the last one I shared. It's not really all that different. I just have found some better ways to do it, and I prefer it this way. So to begin, add your olive oil and herbs to a mason jar and set it in a pot of water. Bring the water to a boil and let it sit for 4 to 6 hours. I had a lot of you asking me last time if you could use different oils. You are certainly welcome to. I personally use olive oil because it is inexpensive for me and I can get a lot of it. But other oils would work perfectly fine, and it's really up to what you can get a grasp on. Now, one thing to keep in mind, something like coconut oil, which does tend to be solid at room temperature, I wouldn't add as much beeswax into the recipe if you are using an oil that is solid at room temperature, because then you'll just have a very stiff salve. But beyond that, you're really welcome to change it up as you please. Now, a lot of you also had questions on the cooking situation and if you could cook using a crock pot, and I think that is a fantastic idea and probably a little safer. Personally, I've been pretty fine. I spend a lot of time in my kitchen in general, so just having something on the back burner really isn't a problem for me. But I understand for those of you that don't spend a lot of time in the kitchen, putting it in a crock pot is a good way to do it, and it would keep it at a very stable temperature. So just feel free to mess around with it and play around and figure other things out. All the recipes I share with you guys really are just recipes I've figured out from tweaking and learning. I mean, even here you can see how my salve recipe has evolved since the last one. So have fun with it. You know, it's okay to mess up and try again. One thing I would like to add during the cooking situation: while you're adding the herbs into the oil, be sure to infuse your intent into this. You may want to bless each herb in your hands as you go and add them. Just, infuse your energy into it. And personally, while it's cooking, I like to go and give it a little stir every once in a while and just infuse more intent into it as it goes. So once it's done, pull the herbs off the heat and cover it with a towel and let it set overnight. The next day, pull out another pot, take your jar of oil, put it into the pot, and alongside that add another little jar and place in that the beeswax. Then add some water and bring it to a boil. Here we're just melting the beeswax and bringing the oil up to temperature to match the temperature of the beeswax. Once again, make sure to infuse intent here and just work and connect and be present in this moment in what you're working on. Once the beeswax is melted, take the oil and the beeswax off the stove and pour the oil into the melted beeswax. Personally, I have recently been keeping the herbs in the oil as it heats up for a second time, just because it has a little bit more of an infusion here. But you're welcome to strain it after the overnight stay if you would prefer. Either way works. This time I just strained the oil out into the beeswax and it was pretty good. Then once your oil and beeswax is fully mixed, add in that spoonful of olive oil, and if you so choose, you can add some essential oils here. Personally, I don't always add essential oils, but essential oils are a good way to go if you don't have access to dried or fresh herbs. Now, one note that I probably should have mentioned earlier, but when using herbs for making salves, I would probably recommend using dried herbs unless you plan on using the salve pretty quickly. Now, of course, this does depend. The other day I made a poison ivy salve, and in that I was using jewelweed, and I was relying on the guck and goo from inside the plant to make the salve. And you do require those herbs to be fresh to get the guck and goo out of it for its medicinal uses. So in that case, I would always recommend using fresh herbs. But for something like this, dried herbs are probably better. However, having said that, if you are somebody that is fairly anxious and you think you'll go through this salve pretty quickly, go ahead and use fresh herbs and you'll have no problem. It really just cuts down on how long it will keep. But really, that's up to each individual to decide how much they will really be using this or require it. So once everything is mixed together properly, it is time to add it into your tins. So just pour it out into any tin or heat-safe container. Personally, I do have tins for this in this video, but recently I've been using old jam jars and just anything with a lid that is heat-safe. Then once it's all poured out all nice and neatly, just set it and let it cool for as long as it takes for it to become solid. Then, there you go. It's ready for use. Personally, I've been using this on my hands whenever I'm feeling a little bit anxious, but if you're having a particularly difficult time, you could also add a stripe to your forehead. But that's just about it. It should keep, I would say, for 6 months to a year. It could keep longer, it may not keep as long, it really depends on your process. I do always get asked how long these things will keep, and that is my rough guesstimate, but honestly, it's going to depend on how you store it, how you use it, and how you made it. So just keep an eye on it. If it starts to smell rancid, don't use it anymore. But if it smells fine and looks fine, you're golden. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to all of you over on my Patreon for, number one, allowing me to do another salve, but also giving me some inspiration for creating this. And honestly, it's something that I could really use right now and have really needed for a while, and I appreciate that. It's very helpful. If you want to check out my second channel, which is kind of a vlog channel at this point, I will link that down below. And of course, if you want to go check out my Patreon to help support this channel and my other one, I would really appreciate that. There, I just share my art and some other personal little things. So I hope you all are doing well and are having a lovely week, and I hope you guys enjoy this little practice and find use with it. So thank you. I've said thank you a lot. Clearly I can't close out this video, but okay. Thank you guys. I hope you're doing well, and I hope to see you soon.